World War II's winters didn't just test soldiers, they tried to erase them. Rifles froze stiff, boots shattered under the frost, and skin turned hard and glassy before dawn. On the front lines, warmth didn't bring comfort, it kept them alive. One stolen spark could mean the difference between another breath and another body stacked by the wire. Forget the movies with roaring stoves and steaming mugs of coffee. The real story was filthier, meaner, and colder. Soldiers hoarded candle stubs like treasure, fed stoves with trash, grease, and even the letters they meant to send home. Helmets doubled as radiators, tin cans became tiny furnaces, and every night another desperate trick was born. There was no glory, no medals for ingenuity. Every puff of smoke, every flicker of flame, every grimy hack wasn't heroism. It was bargaining with death, buying just enough time to see another dawn. Official field stoves? Useless. The real engine of winter survival was battlefield junk, mangled into fire hazards by desperate hands with nothing left to lose. Some frostbitten bastard spotted salvation in a spent artillery shell. Smash it open, punch holes for air, cram in tin cans, and you've got a crooked little chimney. Anything that burned went in. Ration boxes, bootlaces, splintered crate wood, scraps of uniform if you were desperate enough. The heat tasted like smoke and defeat, but it beat the cold. And right then, that was all that mattered. Don't picture cozy campfires. These stoves coughed up lungfuls of toxic smoke, threatened to explode if you nudged them wrong, and had squads hunched together hacking, eyes watering, clutching heat like contraband. Keeping the hellish thing burning until sunrise, regardless of the rules, was all that counted. Whoever managed it survived. Every squad earned its pyromaniac. Some guys learned to spot stove materials during the shelling. Empty tin cans, busted ammo crates, shards of shovel blades, each one worth more than extra rations. There was no blueprint. Some worked by luck, others from borrowed wisdom. If you pack the stove too tight, it chokes. Leave it open and the heat sneaks away. Boots lined up like casualties near the fire, hoping to dry before trench rot set in. Most times, shoes came out misshapen and reeking, but nobody cared if it meant keeping frostbite at bay for another day. The failures were legendary. Stoves hissed, popped, spat flames into dugouts. One guy engineered a double-chamber cooker, melted everything inside, including his last pair of socks. Another rigged his shell heater to a tin mess cup, turned it into a hand warmer, and promptly passed out from smoke inhalation. The bravest always risked burning fuel that reeked, waxy ration wrappers, scraps of chemically treated canvas, sometimes even bits of old kit. No one asked questions. If a scavenged stove gave off heat, it became sacred. The only metric was survival, and out here, ingenuity meant the difference between numb knees and gangrene. If a stove was out of reach or already liberated by another squad, fire got small, candle small. The candle was no symbol of hope. Soldiers snapped issued candles in half, jammed them into overturned helmets or battered mess tins, and prayed the flame held long enough to thaw meat or coax life back into numb fingers. Clay pots became battlefield currency, treasured for the small miracles they delivered. Drop a candle inside and flip it over, and the pot transformed into a tiny, smoky radiator, coaxing warmth into numb fingers. Mess tins became portable heat, warming hands or even drying socks before guard duty. Helmets weren't just headgear, they were mini stoves, hollowed and punctured to hold candles that glowed brighter than any ration dinner. Flames flickered with every gust of wind, smoke filled the dugouts, and half the time the fire vanished in a panic of shelling, leaving only stench and cold. Soldiers pressed hands to whatever warmth lingered, fingertips blue and raw, learning to treasure every moment of stolen heat. When candles died, ingenuity took over. Rancid tin fat, scraps of cloth, or even boot polish became fuel. Each flicker was life, each trick a testament to desperate creativity, a small victory against the freezing grip of winter. Every improvised radiator, no matter how smoky or unstable, was a lifeline, and soldiers learned fast that survival depended on who could wring warmth from the most unlikely sources. Supplies never lasted. When candles died, men clawed for alternatives nobody wrote home about. Someone always remembered the trick. Scrape fat from rancid tins, twist a shoelace into a wick, and light it inside a broken teacup. The flames sputtered, trailing black grease up the walls, but that sliver of warmth sent hands reaching, broken, swollen, filthy, all equal before the candle's feeble promise. Sometimes the pot itself was the hack. Helmets doubled as radiators. Flip one, punch a hole at the top, nestle a candle inside, and you'd swear the metal grew hotter than any ration dinner. Some nights, men passed mess tins back and forth between stints at the firing line, soaking up whatever heat clung to soaked gloves. Knock over a candle and panic erupted. One fireball could eat the last dry blanket. No one slept easy. The jokes came mean. Don't breathe too hard, you'll snuff out winter. Grown men packed clay pots and helmet stoves into their letters home, pretending the whole business was an adventure, not a smoky confession of how close the cold came every night to winning outright. Too broke for fuel, too unlucky to score a working stove? Soldiers got inventive with the only things left in bombed-out ruins: chunks of brick, shattered stones, rusty bits of metal fence. These weren't tools, they were lifelines. You heated anything heavy by the fire, if you had one, then shoved it into muddy foxhole walls, buried it under your blanket, pressed it between bruised knees. The warmth hit in sudden fleeting bursts, enough to stave off frostbite, enough to punish hands that lingered too long. Some tricks were half legend, half desperation. Men who'd scavenged bricks from collapsed houses swore the damn thing stayed hot longer than anything the army supplied. Stones from frozen riverbeds, dug out by numb fingers, doubled as hand warmers until the heat faded. After that, they just became one more lump in a disease-ridden sleeping bag. Scrap iron was riskier, hot enough to keep feeling in your feet, dangerous enough to burn straight through the soles of a boot if you blinked too long. Passing around a heated brick became ritual. One man would clutch it until he couldn't bear the sting, then pitch it down the line. Nobody cared who held it last as long as someone did. Dry clothing? Rare. Wet gloves? Always. Twisting a hot stone between two bodies offered a chance at sleep. Frostbitten fingers learned fast: keep the heat moving or lose everything. Nobody wrote home about these hacks, nobody bragged, but more than one unlucky bastard owed the rest of his toes to a lump of brick thrown straight out of a ruined farmhouse. Some nights, stoking warmth meant taking risks nobody wanted to admit. Men buried stones under foxhole snow, praying for pocket-sized furnaces. A soldier who got clever might wedge iron between layers of wet sandbags. If he didn't burn himself through, he might finally thaw boots frozen to the ground. Injuries came standard: blisters from overheated metal, cracked nails from stone handled too rough. But the rules of winter were simple: anything for heat, nothing for comfort. And if you found something that worked, you didn't share the secret with headquarters. You shared it with whoever woke up beside you, still breathing. Every army memo yammered about keeping socks dry, boots clean, feet aired. In the trenches, this read like a joke. You spent days ankle-deep in freezing mud, boots soaked through before breakfast, socks turned to wet pulp. Everyone lived in fear of trench foot, nerves gone dead, skin gone gray, the slow creep of gangrene. The only real fix was filthy improvisation. You dried gear like a criminal. Boots steamed over scavenged stoves, propped awkwardly over tin cans stuffed with burning ration box wrappers. Guys yanked off soaking socks, wrapped them in mess tins, and roasted them on toxic stoves until the wool reeked of charred meat and last week's laundry. Some swore by the trick: heated stones shoved inside boots to dry, or boiling water poured into socks, all in the hope of coaxing out a few precious hours before the cycle repeated. It was a trade-off. Too much heat, and the boots warped, cracked, shrunk a size, left your feet bleeding. Not enough, and you woke up fused to the ground, toes already numb, fungus sprouting in every crease. Glove-drying rituals were just as desperate. Canvas mitts draped over fire, hands held out for a puff of warmth, the smell of burning leather overlaying the stink of old fear. You didn't change socks, you cooked them. Nobody asked permission, nobody told command. The dry pair? Stolen, bartered, or scrounged after a lucky break in the weather. You learned to worship warmth and gear over food, pride, or regulation, because out here, losing feeling meant losing toes, and one misstep from trench rot was a short walk to the bone saw. Officers preached layering, as if uniforms stitched by the lowest bidder could fend off a Siberian front. The real secret was stuffing boots with whatever nonsense fit. Soldiers tore insulation from bombed houses, packed boots and collars with filthy straw, scavenged rags, and even sacrificed spare shirt sleeves just for another inch between their skin and the next freeze. Paper was gold. Any scrap of newspaper, even propaganda leaflets from the enemy, became armor against the wind. Socks were lined with straw or rag, helmets padded with anything soft enough not to gouge a hole with each step. Some guys swore by wool stolen from abandoned livestock stalls. Others found a weird genius in lining fatigues with old packing, cigarette cartons, even strips of greasy cardboard, anything to catch a bit of warmth before it leaked out and left them shivering. Rumors spread like trench fever. Some claimed a potato sack could save your feet. Others swore by curtains torn from ruined apartment blocks and wrapped tight around the chest. One half-mad survivor tried to insulate his boots with dried mud, swearing it stayed solid, and then nearly lost his toes when it shattered in the freeze. Word-of-mouth hacks traveled faster than memos. Failures disappeared. The hacks that worked got hoarded, shared only among the desperate. It was a war of one-upmanship. Who could find the next insulation fix before the cold did? Old ration boxes gutted for lining, hay filched from horse stalls, even the shreds of kit sent from home. All tested, swapped, and thrown away when they failed. Desperation made scientists of every grunt and spread misery equally. The only law was, if it worked tonight, it might save you tomorrow. But longer-term comfort? Never an option. Just survival, invention, and a sliver of luck in a landscape full of frostbite and failure. Pride was the first casualty to cold. You could outlast hunger. You could bluff through shelling. But once the temperature dropped and every scrap of kit failed, men made their own insulation. Each other. Rank vanished beneath frozen blankets, privates jammed together with lieutenants, officers trading dignity for an hour pressed tight against a pair of greasy boots. The ritual was primal. 2, 3, sometimes 5 men piled up in a dugout so narrow you breathe someone else's sweat with every inhale. Heated stones passed around, ration tin radiators wedged between bare knees, boots shared under a single foul-smelling tarp. If one guy had a slightly less wet coat, the rest rotated through, each soaking up a minute of borrowed warmth before it bled away. There was no shame, just survival. The jokes came bitter. Army calls it camaraderie, we call it not dying tonight. Foxholes stank of crowded bodies, wet wool, burned candle wax, and all the exhaustion nobody wrote about. Some squads developed chain sleep schedules, 10 minutes pressed against a human furnace, then swap out for the guy on sentry so nobody ended up frozen stiff. On nights bad enough, men stripped down and stacked together under a blanket so sodden it felt more like punishment, swapping hand warmers and rationed stones so no one got left out. The dugout passed around more than heat. Scraps of food, dry socks, and a stone stolen from the frozen ground, each offering a sliver of survival. The only rule was take your turn, don't hog the warmth, and if someone wakes shaking, you grip tighter. Nobody cared about army protocol, just the pulse beneath your arm and the promise that just maybe you'd make it until sunrise. Think a mug of tea makes you weak? Ask anyone who spent a week in a freezing foxhole how many rules they'd break for a cup of anything hot. Ration packets promised instant coffee, but most nights it was boiled over a heater hacked from shell fragments and tin scrap with melted snow raked in by the cupful. The first sip didn't taste like comfort, it tasted like survival. Tea became a lifeline. Every sip passed around was a small victory against the cold. Squads rotated mess tins, each man slurping his ounce before passing it to the next shivering set of hands. If someone had the luck and nerve to score real coffee or cocoa from a Red Cross parcel, morale soared. The heat didn't last. 5-10 minutes of warmth, then the ice crept back in. Recipes got filthy. Snow melted over a candle, ration chocolate dissolved, maybe a fistful of sugar from a care package. On the bleakest nights, soup was salvage, an oily skim of boiled meat, gritty with mud scraped from a mess tin. Water thawed enough to drink went straight into concoctions nobody would touch in peace. Fat from canned meat, bones stewed until the pot was sticky, anything to turn freezing liquid into heat behind the ribs. There were tricks to stretch it. Some squads passed cups in rotation. Top dog drank first. Recruits scraped the last tepid mouthful. Hoarders got no mercy. Nothing was more dangerous than a man with dry lips and a private flask. Jokes ran bitter. Not real coffee, but it's hot. Shut up and drink. Nobody cared if stew tasted like a boot. Any heat on the inside was a weapon against the cold. For a few stolen minutes, steam fogged goggles, hands thawed, and some poor bastard thought he might live through one more night in a war that gave nothing for free but misery. Forget the History Channel fairy tales. No one survived World War II winter by following the rules on their enlistment forms. Survival came from scavenging, jerry-rigging, occasional bartering, and hushed sharing. Soldiers learned fast that out in the snow, the only authority was cold, and it demanded total surrender. Officers barked orders about vigilance and duty. The frost barked back with numb feet, split knuckles, and the stench of rot where regulation failed. This was the arithmetic of trench wisdom. You could believe in rank, in stripes, in the idea that if you suffered enough, you'd be rewarded with medals and steaming soup. Or you could learn the real equation. Survival was measured in hacks, a shell stove that didn't explode, a mess tin candle that coughed out just enough heat, a soup made from melted snow and whatever the rats hadn't claimed. Survival depended on pooling warmth, swapping stories of desperate invention, and admitting, just for a moment, that dignity had to take a backseat to reality. The legends of endurance were never the ones who stuck it out alone. They were the ones who put up with foul-smelling feet in their face beneath a shared tarp, who handed off the last dry sock, who knew that if you hoarded the best trick in a winter foxhole, the cold would claim the whole squad eventually. Ingenuity got you one step ahead of the frost. Generosity kept you in the contest through the next night. For every photo of men gathered around a fairy tale campfire, there are 10,000 faces no one remembers, hunched over boot-polish flames, passing hot rocks, trading dark jokes and worse rations, surviving in the grim democracy of mutual need. So next time someone sells you a story of stoic heroism or winter glory, picture instead the stinging heat of a singed boot, the taste of snow-melt tea, the silence when a candle finally flickered out. Remember, dignity's a luxury, warmth is currency, and the extraordinary story of winter survival isn't about heroics at all. It's about how far people go and how close they huddle when the only thing left between them and oblivion is a handful of hard-won makeshift tricks.